The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
If this news is true, Canucks fans have every right to be effing pissed.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, happy hump day and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also a Canucks writer currently with the Daily Hive, Vancouver. Before we dive into the show, we got to thank you for tuning into Locked On Canucks because it is your Canucks every damn day. And we're not here without you tuning in, so we appreciate the hell out of you for being here. Rick Tocchet clearly did not appreciate being with the Vancouver Canucks. Of course, we all know this management team, they wanted him back. Rutherford just sounding downright sad when Rick Tocchet delivered the news that he wouldn't be back. Rutherford echoed some sentiments of sadness when talking to the media. And one of the main reasons why we were told that Rick Tocchet wasn't returning to the Vancouver Canucks was because of family reasons. And that makes the news from today a little disturbing if you're a fan of the Vancouver Canucks. So let's get into the news about Rick Tocchet potentially heading to a Western Conference team. We'll also get into, should the Canucks go nuclear? Something we touched on towards the end of yesterday's episode. I'll dive into it a bit again on today's episode of Locked On Canucks. We'll also talk about another head coaching candidate entering the chat for the Vancouver Canucks and reports about what the Canucks are looking for with their next bench boss. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Canucks. But let's start with the man himself, Rick Tocchet. Now, one thing we do know for sure is that Rick Tocchet returning to TNT on Friday and Saturday for their broadcast of the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But that's not the news I'm talking about here. Two different reporters have mentioned that Rick Tocchet has been involved with Western Conference teams and in terms of potentially coaching them down the road here. Now, what we learned in the aftermath of Rick Tocchet saying no to the Vancouver Canucks and Rutherford's comments as well was that, you know, Tocchet's son, Trevor Tocchet, great name choice, Rick. Good job there. Trevor Tocchet was working in Seattle, or I believe it's Seattle. It was out west, and he has now since moved back east. So, of course, Tocchet said he wanted to be in the Eastern Conference to be closer to his family. But, and this comes from a couple of reporters, but let's touch on the report from Frank Saravalli first. Frank Saravalli has reported that Tocchet has potentially interviewed with the Seattle Kraken. What? To be the next head coach of that hockey club. Of course, they're one of a handful of teams now looking for another head coach in the aftermath of the end of the NHL season. And that would go directly against the report that Rick Tocchet wanted to be back east to be closer to his family. Now, for longtime listeners of Locked On Canucks, the everydayer, shout out to you guys. Shout out to even the occasional listeners. You know, over the years that we've been a little critical of Frank Saravalli and his reporting. Sometimes miss the mark, sometimes just reporting things to maybe, you know, cause a little drama. And of course, that happened with the Tom Willander situation where he reported that there was a done deal. And of course, there was not a done deal. And that is still an ongoing saga for your Vancouver Canucks. And of course, Frank Saravalli is now leaving Daily Faceoff. So who even knows what's next for that guy? But Frank Saravalli, again, reporting Rick Tocchet interviewed to be the next head coach of the Seattle Kraken. And maybe there's a family dynamic we're missing there, right? You know, maybe Trevor Tocchet's still in Seattle. Maybe that reporting was false. That one was coming from Rick Dhaliwal of Czech TV. But even then, if his son was in Seattle, you know that Vancouver is, you know, a 2 to 3 hour drive away. So, and again, Kyle and I touched on it. Everydayers know the whole idea that Tocchet's primary reason for not coming back to the Vancouver Canucks was family. I'm not saying that it wasn't the primary reason, but I don't believe it was the driving force. I truly believe that Rick Tocchet didn't believe what Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford were doing. Now, if we want to get into the rumblings or tie some strings together here, you know, one of the things that stood out from the end of season media availability was two things. Rick Tocchet, very complimentary of JT Miller, right? He missed having JT Miller on this team. He went to bat for JT Miller during his last press conference with the Vancouver Canucks. And with Elias Pettersson, he danced around it a bit, but that quote stands out that Petey needs to meet me at the 50-yard line. And again, some rumblings out there right now that, Tocchet wasn't necessarily a fan of the Canucks choosing Pettersson over Miller. Now, that is not confirmed. And, of course, when Pettersson signed the extension with the Vancouver Canucks, maybe Tocchet was seeing something behind the scenes that we're not seeing or that we don't know about. But when Pettersson signed that contract, he was one of the highest scoring players in the NHL under Rick Tocchet, right? He signed in early March. He had that one bad month in February. The tendonitis ended up getting blamed for it later on. He said it was bugging him for a few months. But at the end of January, I pulled up the stat before, I'll say it again. From the time Rick Tocchet got hired in January of 2023 to the end of January in 2024, Elias Pettersson was 7th overall in the NHL in points. And of course, it's all fallen off the rails since. We're all very well aware of that. But again, was Rick Tocchet already not believing in Elias Pettersson at the time? And it does make me fascinated that if Elias Pettersson does stick around, can the next head coach get more out of him? Did Pettersson and Tocchet potentially not have the greatest relationship? Because again, when you hear reports about Tocchet interviewing in Seattle, it becomes less and less believable that family reasons and a desire to be back on the East Coast were the primary drivers here. Because again, if that was true, and if Sarah Valley's reporting is true about him interviewing with the Seattle Kraken, if you really wanted to be back in the East Coast to be near your family, why would you even entertain that call? Why would you do it? And look, the Seattle Kraken, I think they're similar to the Canucks. Unfortunately, I've said it before. If Pettersson isn't going to standard, the Seattle Kraken are a team with a lot of pieces, but not a lot of elite pieces, right? Of course, the difference in Vancouver is we have Quinn Hughes and they don't. Although Vince Dunn, Brandon Montour, good players overall. But you can't look at that Seattle job and say that it's that much more attractive than the Canucks unless you truly don't believe in Elias Pettersson bouncing back and getting to the level that he was at through his first 5 NHL seasons, more or less. So that was one report. Rick Tocchet potentially interviewing with the Seattle Kraken. Frank Saravalli did go on to say that it would be a long shot that Rick Tocchet wouldn't end up in Seattle. But to my point, why even entertain that call if you want to be back on the East Coast? Now, this wasn't the only rumbling about Tocchet wanting to go back out west, because Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic also reported that Rick Tocchet has had some communication with the Anaheim Ducks about their head coaching vacancy as well. So you got Seattle, you got Anaheim. Those are two teams. They don't get much more west than that. And again, who knows if these reports are necessarily true, but if they are, and Tocchet told Canucks fans that, he wanted to be closer to family. It was a personal reason. Being closer to family, that would be a straight up lie if this guy did end up with the Western Conference team. Being closer to family, if your family's on the East Coast, you're not that much closer in Seattle or Anaheim than you would have been with the Vancouver Canucks. Now, of course, this kind of ties into how a lot of fans feel about Tocchet, right? And you've heard this rhetoric out there before. Rick Tocchet's been a head coach for 8 NHL seasons. He made the playoff twice. I actually didn't even realize this, or I forgot about it, to be honest. But one of the times he made the playoffs was in the bubble year. And we barely count that as Canucks fans, but you should especially not count it as Arizona Coyotes fans. They were 22nd overall in the NHL when they went into the bubble playoffs and ended up getting into the first round. I think they beat the Nashville Predators in the bubble series and got into the first round and got walloped by the Colorado Avalanche. But look, I'm not going to start changing course here. I was a fan of what Tocchet did in Vancouver, but I also bleed the blue and green, baby. And I want people in Vancouver that also bleed the blue and green. And Rick Tocchet, for a guy that wanted to meet pressure with pressure and embrace the hard, he jumped ship at the first opportunity. And man, oh man, is he a liar? Is he a hypocrite? I don't know. But these things are not painting Tocchet in a positive light when you hear reports about him interviewing at Anaheim, and interviewing in Seattle. And if that does happen, Canucks fans, you should be booing this guy when he comes back to Vancouver. I hope it's not true. I don't want to assume anyone's a liar. But again, you got multiple reporters in Frank Seravalli and Pierre LeBrun saying that Rick Tocchet is talking to Western Conference teams. And not just as Western Conference as Chicago. Like as west as it gets. The West Coast, the best coast. Man, oh man. But hey, good riddance, man. Good riddance to Rick Tocchet. And again, as we get into the show here, we'll talk about some other candidates who have entered the chat here for your Vancouver Canucks. I'll touch on that later in the show. But in the next segment, I do want to expand on one thing that Kyle and I talked about yesterday. And that was, should the Canucks go nuclear at forward this offseason? What does that look like? Is it feasible? Let's touch on that here on the other side here on Locked On Canucks. Before we start talk about going nuclear, we got to talk about dem nuts, baby. Because if you're looking for the snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you got to crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats. Oh, baby. And that helps you keep you feeling fuller for longer. And you know me, I love the no-shells variety. I pop those naked nuts in my mouth morning, noon, and night. And if you prefer the teas, you know that the in-shell options are also a classic favorite. So whether you like the no-shells or the in-shell options, make sure you just get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every day. And I do see the comments popping off a little bit here on YouTube Live about the coaching debacle here, if you want to call it that. Rick Tocchet again. The Canucks wanted him back. He did not want to be in Vancouver. Bye-bye, Felicia. But again, I do hope he's not lying to Canucks fans and that he's going to take a job in the Western Conference. But again, why even interview for those jobs? To me, it doesn't make sense unless it is a BS report. But when it comes from two different guys, I'm less likely to believe Seravalli. But when you get Seravalli and LeBrun reporting this, that to me, there's a little bit of smoke there that Canucks fans should be aware of. Obviously, it wasn't just smoke this season in Vancouver. It was a full-blown tire fire. And, I still, as we've had some time to digest this season, I still commend this team for even being in the thick of the playoff race based on how many things went wrong for this team. But, of course, the number one issue with this team, aside from just Elias Pettersson falling off a cliff, was the offense in general. And, again, you started the season with Pettersson and Miller. Now you got no more Miller. And should you even keep Elias Pettersson? So there's a lot of different things here with the Vancouver Canucks, but let's expand on the idea from yesterday. And this is, should the Canucks go nuclear this offseason, especially at their forward group and especially at their center ice group? And what I mean by this is, do you trade Pettersson? Is there a deal, and we mentioned this before, the Pettersson for Barzal thing? You got Elias Pettersson, who was clearly underperformed in Vancouver. You got Matt Barzal, who honestly is still a pretty damn good player, but he suffered some injuries. He seems like he's not necessarily happy there. He doesn't have a no movement clause or anything like that. So, and you got a new GM in New York too, who may want to go in a different direction. Plus, you got Bo Horvat with the New York Islanders, who, has openly talked about as recently as a couple months ago how much he loves Elias Pettersson and how he would love to play with him again. So it begs the question, does a Pettersson for Barzal trade make sense? And I truly believe that, if it was straight up Pettersson for Barzal, I'd probably close my eyes and do it if I were the Vancouver Canucks. Now, because of Canucks luck, I firmly believe that Pettersson, he will bounce back, especially with another team. Will he bounce back in Vancouver? I'm not so certain of that. But just based on how unlucky the Canucks have been throughout their history, Pettersson is bouncing back if he goes to another team. It's the Canuck way, baby. But Matt Barzal, again, you get a guy who would truly want to be a Vancouver Canuck, who does have elite talent. And man, I wanted to pull up his player card for a second here. courtesy of The Athletic. Because Barzal had such an injury-riddled season, he played in less than half the games. It's interesting to see that, based on The Athletic's math, he's got a salary of $9.2 million. He's actually been providing a $10.1 million value. And again, The Athletic most heavily rates this past season, but looks at the last 3 years in total. And in terms of Matt Barzal, an incredible 5-on-5 player, which is something that the Canucks have struggled with. Not as great on the power play. That is an interesting thing to see with Matt Barzal there. But I think, again, a better, well-rounded player than he probably gets credit for, and just an elite producer at 5-on-5. And again, Elias Pettersson, if you're curious about his market value, they feel like has him at $6.6 million, so and a surplus value of negative $5 million. This is entering Tyler Myers' OEL territory from a couple seasons ago. But of course, the defensive metrics bring him up, and of course, it weighs the past 3 seasons. But when you look at those numbers, Pettersson market value at $6.6 million, Matt Barzal worth $10.1 million. It feels like the Canucks would probably have to add, unless whoever they hire in New York is just the biggest fan ever of Elias Pettersson. So please hire another Swedish general manager. Make the New York Islanders the second Swedish general manager in the NHL. Marcus Naslund, maybe he's worked in management. Peter Forsberg, come on, baby. So again, in terms of the Canucks going nuclear, Pettersson for Barzal is part of that conversation. The other one that we've looked at here on the show is Dylan Larkin. Now, Dylan Larkin, again, I thought he'd be a lifelong Red Wing. I still think that's certainly a possibility. More likely than not, he does stay with the Red Wings for the rest of his career. But when you hear him chirping his own GM and his GM firing back, saying the star players need to find that motivation themselves, you just start to wonder if Dylan Larkin is a long-term fit with the Detroit Red Wings, that is. And I don't think the Detroit Red Wings would do this because, they got Axel Sandin, Pelika. They got Moritz Seider. But you look at something like Tom Willander in this year's 15th overall pick. That should be a conversation that at least gets things started with the Detroit Red Wings. Now, the big caveat is they don't really have a center, unless you think Marco Kasper is a first liner, to replace Larkin in the medium term here. But maybe they take some assets. If you got Pelika, Willander, Moritz Seider on the right side, maybe you take one of those assets, you can flip them for a center. But, I think the only way this happens is if Detroit truly believes that they need to reset. You can't call it a rebuild when you've missed the playoffs for 8 seasons in a row, but that they can reset things there over in Detroit. So my question to you Canucks fans is, do you think the Canucks should go nuclear this option? And I'm not convinced of this, but I also don't have as much belief in as Elias Pettersson, nearly as much as I did a few months ago when I felt like I was still one of his most staunch believers. Because you go this long without performing, you come in out of shape, reportedly with an entitled attitude, according to our insider, Mother Knucker. Check out that episode from now Monday, I believe. You start to wonder whether the Canucks really should consider going nuclear. Because, look, I see some fans here talking about, it's time, rebuild, the Canucks got to rebuild. Look, as long as Quinn Hughes is here, it doesn't make sense to rebuild. Because you are not going to find a better player than Quinn Hughes unless you get lucky. And getting lucky is no way to plan for the future. So when the Canucks are now, clearly the center ice position is the greatest area of weakness. If you could bring in Larkin and Barzal to be your 1-2, Filipino as number 3, re-sign Pius Suter as a potential fill in at center, now you start to talk about a team that actually has some depth down the middle. I still think they need some more options maybe on the wing, but maybe Filipino hits above. Barzal can shift to the wing as well. He actually has primarily played the wing for the last little bit here with the New York Islanders. But I guess Canuck fans, what do you prefer? Would you prefer to hold on to Pettersson, hope for the best, or maybe shoot lower for a center, or do the Canucks go nuclear, trade Willander, trade their first, trade Pettersson? You probably got to add a little bit on top of that, to be honest, and get guys like Larkin and Barzal in the door. To me, the Canucks got to explore every avenue, but when you got a guy in Larkin who may be unhappy with the Detroit Red Wings, you got a guy in Barzal who may be happy with the Islanders, and he's from Coquitlam, baby. Beautiful Coquitlam. I think you got to look long and hard about paying some serious assets to bring those guys in the door. Let's hear what you think on the other side, and I'll also talk about another Canucks coaching candidate who's entered the chat. You listen to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. We'll see ya on the other side, baby.
An award-winning mattress can change your life. I speak from experience. It happened to me. After years of uncomfortable sleeps, I recently switched to Bear Mattress, and the results were instant. Bear Mattress is designed with a focus on recovery, cooling, and pressure relief to upgrade your sleep and improve your overall quality of life. I used to deal with night sweats, but Bear's best-in-class cooling ensures optimal temperature regulation, which prevents overheating and helps me stay comfortable all night long. Bear offers a wide variety of mattresses, but to get the right one for you, take their sleep quiz that matches you to your perfect mattress based on body type and sleep preferences. Go to bearmattress.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every day. And man, oh man, I'm not a great friend. I kept saying co-host of Locked On Canucks. Didn't even mention that I wasn't joined by my co-host, Kyle Bowen. But Kyle is now here. You look like you just woke up. You locked in the basement somewhere. How you doing, buddy?
Yep, just woke up. I said, puck it. I'm working like 14 hours a day. I hate to just like sleep today, man. I slept till 11:30. Have you ever done that before, Trevor? It's called, wearing some rubber, dude. You can still do it if you, wake up at, you know what I'm saying? You can still do anything you want, Trevor. Okay? That's yep. I'm a single man, no kids. Anyways, no head coach too. Okay? No head coach too. And I'm hopping on because I'm making a demand. If Rick Tocchet coaches Anaheim, LA, Seattle, if he coaches Seattle, if he coaches one of those teams and he, visits Vancouver as a visitor for, again, one of those teams, the Canucks cannot give that guy a video tribute. Sorry, you won one playoff round. Who cares about an individual award? We've won Jack Adams before. Who cares? You don't get a video tribute because you quit on the team. And I'm tired of people quitting on this team. Okay? Because to me, it's like, why'd you take those interviews? Probably to get your price up, right? Maybe like it's a negotiation tactic, right? You got to see what's out there. But a part of me is just like, maybe like nobody on the East really wants him, like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, you could be right. There's a potential that Tocchet has overplayed his hand here because now he's been gone for what now? A week and change from your Vancouver Canucks, maybe just over a week. Was it last Tuesday or last Monday that this came out? You think that look how fast Mike Sullivan got hired by the New York Rangers. You would think that if Tocchet really had it lined up in Philadelphia, that contract would probably be done by now. And it does make you think that, potentially he overplayed his hand. But I did want to get to this comment from Dan Jardine saying, can anyone point me to a quote of Rick Tocchet saying that he wanted to go back east? I can't find a direct quote, but for me, it's tying things together, right? The first thing that Rick Tocchet said in his statement is, I'm choosing to move on from the Vancouver Canucks. Family is a priority, and with my contract lapsing, this has become the opportune time. And then Rick Dollywall came out and said that Rick Tocchet's son, Trevor, used to live out west in Seattle and has now since moved back east. So that's really the reporting we have to go on in terms of him wanting to be near family. But, Kyle, he potentially could have overplayed his hand. But yeah, that being said, I mean, that would be a big slap in the face of the Canucks fans if he goes to Seattle or Anaheim.
Oh, 100%. Because we had one bad year. I think Rick Tocchet's like, and this is a good note to have. I feel like it's a pretty good sample size. What he coached, like, what would it be, like 190, 200 Canucks games in his life in the regular season? He's probably like on points percentage, like what, third or second all time with the Vancouver Canucks. But obviously the trauma and the noise and Patterson versus Miller and all the bullshit got to him, and boom, bam, the next thing you know, he joins JT Miller on, abandoning this team. Like, I'm getting emotional here. Trevor, at the end of the day, I just want people who want to stay here, okay?
Yeah, I completely agree. And it kind of leads us to, the next head coaching candidate. And we've talked about it. We'll continue talking about it until the Canucks find their coach. But Another recent report from Rick Tocchet suggested that the Canucks want to coach with both NHL and AHL experience, and that leads me to two potential candidates. We've talked about them both a little bit. Mike Vellucci, one of Rutherford's homies. He's won a recent AHL championship with the Charlotte Checkers. He's been behind the bench with the Pittsburgh Penguins as well as an assistant. So he fits that bill as a guy who has NHL and AHL experience. Of course, Manny Malhotra does, but very limited as a head coach. And then Todd Nelson, to me, is a very interesting name because he had a half season coaching behind the Oilers bench for a dumpster fire of a team that didn't do very well. But he's been an outstanding AHL coach. He's coached the Hershey Bears to 2 straight Calder Cup championships, a ton of experience around the game. And even looked at the roster this year, they're in the playoffs, but their top scorer this season was Ethan Bear. Their goaltending with Hunter Shepard and their other backup was giving them sub 900 save percentage, and he still coached this team to be into the second round of the AHL playoffs. So Todd Nelson is a guy I'm interested in. I don't think he's the sexiest name. I don't think he's going to be the biggest PR win, but I think he's a guy who deserves an NHL head coaching opportunity.
Wow. I mean, that could be something. And dude, Trevor, obviously you don't have the stats right in front of you, but another name that's bringing curiosity into my mind and making me think that anything is possible. And this guy's not going to be available to hire, but a guy like this makes you think that, again, going to the AHL could be like going to the lottery and getting a winning ticket ASAP. And who's the Oilers coach right now? Kurt Knockenblocker. What's his name? Bro, that guy's a good head coach, man. And I don't know if he was on anyone's radar. I remember when the Oilers, they fired Woodcroft or whatever his name is, and they brought in Connor McDavid's, I don't know, little brother's head coach. I don't know who Kurt Knockenblocker was, but dude, he's a great head coach. And I'm starting to think the grass is probably greener on the other side. Rick Tocchet, you brought this up earlier in the show. He's made the playoffs, twice as a head coach? Head coaches are supposed to find solutions, get through the mud, get through the bullshit.
Yeah.
So again, Canucks fans, I know, especially me, I've just been so emotional about this and so passionate about I want people to stay here. And I'm talking a lot of ish on Rick Tocchet, and it sounds all emotional, but the facts don't lie. Maybe he's not the best head coach in the world, and that's why the grass may be way greener. And I'm excited to see who the next guy's going to be. So again, yeah, Knockenblocker, Kurt Knockenblocker, what were his stats before he became a head coach? That's what, was he a big name? And the Oilers got him, and dude, the Oilers look good, and they're winning by committee.
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly enough, he was, I thought he went straight from the OHL to the NHL at one point, but no, he was actually an assistant with the Philadelphia Flyers for a couple seasons, then coached the Hartford Wolfpack of the AHL. I believe that's maybe the Rangers affiliate. And then he went to go coach the Edmonton Oilers from the AHL. And again, was not the head coach of the Oilers affiliate down in Bakersfield, but of course had the connection to McDavid, coaching them. Or coaching him when he was in the OHL. So, I mean, look, in terms of his AHL numbers, they weren't spectacular. He missed the playoffs in his first 3 seasons, part of that being COVID related as well, and then made it to round 2 with the Wolfpack in 22-23, and then got off to a good 11-game start before being hired by the Oilers. But I think he's calm, cool, and collected. He's good at making strategic decisions on the fly, but it's hard to know, right? I mean, I have liked what Manny Malhotra has done in Abbotsford in terms of his strategic decisions, making lineup changes that have worked. Even in the AHL playoffs here, shifting DiGiuseppe to the top line when he's playing well, giving guys Blaine, Jujhar Khaira an opportunity, even though they might be vets, you're trying to win right now. So you're boosting those guys up the lineup to go win some playoff games. And show the young guys how it's done at the same time. So I've been a fan of those decisions, and really you want a coach who's going to be hard on players, going to put the right systems in place, but it's also going to be strategic in trying to win hockey games. And Chris Knoblauch does that. I've seen similar things from Manny Malhotra, certainly from watching these AHL playoffs as well.
Oh, his name's Chris Knoblauch?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Now I know that, man.
I like Knockelbacher better, though.
Knockelbacher. And I know this guy Knoblaucher, or whatever his name is, he's got McDavid and Draisaitl, and, obviously you can win with those guys. Those guys are just, they're legends, again, they're again, maybe it wasn't the best example because Draisaitl and McDavid are like Lemieux and Gretzky, right? But like in-game adjustments, we saw this against the Oilers last year, and like we saw it against LA in the first round in this playoffs, and even in the game last night against Vegas. He knows how to make those moves. Like he's pretty efficient at making those decisions, and the kicker is he gets the best out of his players in the playoffs. Connor Brown looking like Connor McBrown. Unreal. So Canucks fans, just I don't know. The news today about Tocchet getting interviewed by the West Coast teams that need head coaches, it pissed me off, but I don't know. I think the grass is greener, and I'm looking forward to it, man.
Well, I think the grass is greener too. Again, I'm just curious if he actually lied to Canucks fans or not, but only time will tell. But speaking of time, I'm not going to waste any more time.
He probably did, because Hughes might leave in a couple years and Pettersson's Pettersson, and it's like, okay, I get it. Like, as a guy that hasn't made the playoffs a lot as a head coach, like it's not going to be a good look for him to like not like if he's a head coach next year, it's gonna look bad for him. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna look really bad. When you look at the resume, and it's like, oh, I made our team's gonna want to hire a guy like that, or will he forever be like a stopgap head coach, right? Because the resume is gonna look like shit. So, end of the day, he's being he's being safe, but I don't want a head coach that's safe, right? I want a head coach that accepts the challenge, and if he goes to the West Coast to head coach a team and get like a new whatever, right? Just a longer leash, like I'm telling you, then it's pretty evident that he quit from the challenge that was fixing the Canucks.
What a quitter, man. Unbelievable. Well, one thing I'm not going to do is quit on the listeners. Let's get to a couple comments before we get out of here on Locked On Canucks. Going back to the conversation about, Pettersson for Barzal, and Kyle, I know you had a comment maybe here, so I want you to touch on it too. But Matthew Judge in the comments saying, Pettersson has a way stronger track record and a higher ceiling than Barzal. So again, you weren't here for that segment, but what are your thoughts on the Canucks going nuclear? Your thoughts on potentially Pettersson for Barzal? I'll leave it to you, buddy.
No, I listened to the segment. Come on, man, I listened to you. I'm a good friend. Trevor. Okay, I'm here to support you. Everyone hit the like button, okay? Dude, I don't think the Canucks should trade Pettersson for Barzal. I think the Canucks, they need to get the most out of Elias Pettersson, right? And they need to get the most out of this team. And I want to be strong down the middle. And I know you were like, okay, trade Pettersson for Barzal, and then you trade Willander in the first for Larkin or another center, and it's like, oh, this is a completely new forward group. But I don't know, man. It's to me, it's like trade the draft picks and Willander for a guy like Matt Barzal and hope that Pettersson and Barzal can carry the load. Like to me, that's it.
So you want the Canucks to not go nuclear, but
just semi-nuclear. Yep. Okay. Diarrhea.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, next comment. Let's get out of here. Oh man, a conspiracy theory here from Trash here today. I love a good conspiracy theory. Tocchett's a Canadian. He said Tocchet leaving could have been related to the Canadian election. The announcement was made the day after the Liberals won. Holy man.
Dude, that one. Yo, we got to get out of here before the government takes us out, Trevor. Sign us out, bro.
All right, sounds good. Well, shout out to you and you for tuning into this episode of Locked On Canucks. From everyone, from the everydayers to the occasional listeners to the first-time listeners, we love each and every one of you. If you like what we're doing or want to help me make my children proud, go hit the like button, the subscribe button on YouTube. On the podcast side, go follow us and leave a 5-star review. But for now, we got to get out of here. Last comment goes to Andrew because it's hump day. The couch pulls out, but we don't. Let's go, baby.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.